I'm pregnant with your husband's child, she whispered into my ear as I poured gravy over the roast. My hand didn't shake. My breath didn't hitch. I simply set the ladle down and turned to look at her. Sierra was smiling. Not wide, not smug. Just enough to let me know she meant every word. Mark didn't notice. My son was too busy scrolling through photos on his phone to see the bomb she had just dropped between the mashed potatoes and green beans. I looked back at the table. Thanksgiving dinner. I had planned it for weeks. The table was set with the good china, the same set Thomas and I had received as a wedding gift 45 years ago. The silverware gleamed. The cranberry sauce was shaped like the can. Mark's favorite. Sierra reached for a dinner roll like nothing had happened. I sat down in silence. I watched her pass butter to Mark. I watched my son thank her, kiss her temple, call her babe. I heard my own heart slow to a crawl as the words repeated in my head. Pregnant. With Thomas's child. My husband. My late husband. I stared at the empty chair beside me, the one I hadn't dared fill. Thomas's chair. No one else had sat there since his funeral. Sierra's fork clinked against her plate. Mark told her to eat more. I swallowed the lump in my throat and forced a smile. I asked Mark how work was going. I asked Sierra how her Pilates classes were. I refilled everyone's glasses. I kept my voice calm, my hands steady. But inside I was falling through something cold and endless. After dinner, Mark offered to load the dishwasher. Sierra joined him in the kitchen, laughing about a TikTok recipe gone wrong. I stayed in the dining room. I needed the quiet. I needed to remember how to breathe. My mind went to the week before Thomas died. He had been home alone. I was out visiting Ruth in Vermont. Sierra had offered to check on him, bring him soup, sit with him. Your family, she had said. Let me help. That week Thomas died in his sleep. Heart failure. The doctor said it was peaceful. I hadn't questioned it. Why would I? But now everything felt different. Now I remembered how Sierra had insisted on handling the funeral arrangements. How she deleted his voicemail. Greeting because it was too hard to hear. How she had cried harder than Mark. Harder than me. I pressed my palm to my chest and felt my heartbeat thudding against my ribs. I wasn't imagining this. Sierra wasn't confused. She had said what she said, and she meant for me to hear it. I got up from the table and walked to the coat closet. Inside, in the back, behind the fall decorations and the box of old scarves, was the small safe Thomas had kept. I remembered the passcode. His birthday. I opened it and saw what I hadn't seen in months. An envelope with my name on it. I had never opened it after the funeral. I had told myself I couldn't bear to read his final words. But now I needed to know. I took the envelope and slipped it into my cardigan. I heard laughter from the kitchen. Sierra. Mark. I walked back in, smiling calm. I thanked them both for dinner. I said I needed some air. I stepped outside into the November cold and sat on the porch swing. The letter in my lap, unopened. My fingers trembling only slightly. I wasn't sure what was in it. I wasn't sure if it would confirm what Sierra had said or leave me more confused. But I knew one thing. The woman who had whispered poison into my ear was not going to win. Not this time. I looked up at the sky. Gray. Heavy. Still. Just like the house I had built with Thomas. Just like the family I thought I still had. But I wasn't finished yet. Not even close. The envelope felt heavier than it should have. Like it had absorbed the weight of everything unspoken between us. I held it in my lap while the wind rustled the last few leaves clinging to the maple tree in the yard. My fingers hovered over the seal, but I did not open it. Not yet. Instead, I listened to the muffled sounds of Mark and Sierra moving around in the kitchen. Their laughter floating through the closed windows like distant echoes of a life I thought I understood. I looked at my reflection in the glass of the storm door. The porch light cast soft shadows on my face, tracing every line, every crease earned through decades of love and loss. I barely recognized the woman staring back at me, not because I looked older but because I looked still, like a statue, unmoving, waiting. When the porch light flickered, I finally stood. The letter went back into my pocket. I would read it, but not now, not with them still here. I stepped inside and smiled as if nothing had changed. Sierra was drying a wine glass. Mark was stacking leftovers into containers. Do you want us to stay and help clean more, Mom? He asked, his voice too casual. I shook my head gently. No, sweetheart. You two go enjoy the rest of your evening. I am just going to put my feet up. Sierra looked at me from over her shoulder. Her lips curled in that same almost smile from before. She knew I had not said a word. And I think she was disappointed. I watched them leave, Mark waving, Sierra brushing past me with the scent of lavender and something sharper. Something like warning. When the door shut, the silence settled in fast. I walked to the living room, turned off the lights, and sat with only the glow of the fireplace and the hum of the refrigerator filling the space. I took out the envelope and opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper in Thomas's handwriting. Familiar, strong, a little shaky at the ends. Elaine, it began. If you are reading this, it means I did not get to tell you what I needed to face. I made mistakes. Not many people get to say that honestly, but I did. I let someone into our life who did not deserve your kindness. I was lonely. That is not an excuse. But it is the truth. I never meant to hurt you. I thought I had time to fix it. I thought I could put it behind us before you ever had to know. I failed. I stopped reading for a moment. The words blurred as my eyes burned. I blinked them clear and continued. I left instructions with Martin, our attorney. If anything happens that feels wrong, too sudden, too strange, talk to him. He knows everything, including the changes I made to the will. I did not want to die with this between us. I love you. I always have. There was no signature. Just a quiet ending to a life filled with louder memories. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. My hands were cold now. I tucked them under my thighs and sat still, the flames flickering against the walls. Thomas had tried to make amends, in his own way, but it was too late. The truth had leaked into the present like a slow poison. And Sierra had not whispered her confession because of guilt. No, she had whispered it because she believed I was powerless, that I had no cards left to play. But she was wrong. I had one. His name was Martin, and tomorrow I would pay him a visit. The next morning I woke before the sun. The house was quiet, the kind of stillness that only comes after a storm no one else knew had passed through. I dressed with care. A gray wool coat, low-heeled shoes, a scarf Thomas had given me one Christmas long ago. I tucked the envelope into my purse, locked the door behind me, and drove to Martin's office. The streets were empty. Just me and the wind and the occasional rustle of leaves across the pavement. Martin Reynolds had been Thomas's attorney for over 20 years. He had handled our mortgage, our wills, even helped us fight a tax dispute once. I trusted him in ways I could no longer trust my own family. The office sat at the corner of Main and Hawthorne, an old brick building with ivy creeping up the sides. I parked in the back and walked to the front entrance, my breath visible in the crisp morning air. The receptionist recognized me immediately. Mrs. Carter, she said kindly. He is expecting you. Go right in. Martin stood when I entered. He looked exactly the same as he did at the funeral. Calm, composed, but with eyes that always seemed to know more than they let on. Elaine, he said, motioning to the chair across from his desk. I was wondering when you might come. I sat down, my hands folded over my purse. I read the letter, I said. And I need you to tell me everything. He nodded slowly. Then he opened a drawer and pulled out a thin folder. Thomas made several changes to his estate plan in the last 6 months of his life, Martin began. He added a clause very specific. He instructed me to keep it confidential unless you asked. Directly, or something unusual happened after his passing. Something unusual, I repeated. Yes, Martin said. Such as a claim of inheritance from someone not named in the original will, or behavior that suggested deception or coercion. I think we have crossed that line, I said, my voice quiet but firm. Martin opened the folder and slid a document across the desk. This is the updated will. You are the sole beneficiary of all property, assets, and investments. The house, the savings, the retirement accounts, everything is yours. No exceptions. I stared at the paper, the lines of legal text blurring slightly. Thomas left no provisions for Mark or Sierra? None, Martin said. He wanted you to decide what, if anything, they would receive. He did not trust Sierra. He suspected manipulation, though he never gave me the full details. I closed my eyes for a moment. The weight of what Thomas had done settled into my chest. There is more, Martin said gently. 2 months before his death, Thomas received a medical bill for a private clinic. He asked me to investigate. The bill was in Sierra's name. I opened my eyes. What kind of clinic? A fertility clinic, he said. But the records were incomplete. The appointment was listed under an alias. Thomas asked me to look deeper, but before we could, he passed away. I felt my heart thudding in my ears. I remembered the way Sierra had held my arm that day at the funeral, whispering how much she had loved Thomas, how deeply she missed him. I had assumed she was just grieving. But now, can you get access to those records? I asked. Possibly, Martin said. But it would require a formal request and likely some resistance. I nodded. Do it. He studied me for a moment. Elaine, are you sure you want to go down this path? I looked him in the eye. I am not just doing this for me. I am doing it for the truth. For what Thomas wanted. And for whatever Sierra thought she could bury. Martin gave a small nod. Then I will start the process today. I stood tightening my coat. As I reached the door I paused. One more thing, I said. Does Sierra know about this version of the will? No, he replied. Thomas instructed me not to file the amendment until you were ready. I smiled. For the first time in days. Good. Let us keep it that way. And I walked out into the cold morning air. My steps steady, my purpose clear. It started coming back to me as I drove home. Little moments scattered across months that had seemed harmless at the time. Sierra staying late after family dinners, offering to help clean up long after Mark had gone upstairs to check work emails. The way she would linger near Thomas's study door, laughing at things only he seemed to say. I had told myself she was just trying to be a good daughter-in-law. I had wanted to believe that so badly. After Thomas passed, she had taken over tasks without being asked. She offered to cancel subscriptions, close accounts, even helped pack up some of his belongings. I remember her asking if I wanted to keep the letters Thomas had written me during our early years. I had said yes, but later I could not find them. I thought I had misplaced them. Now I was not so sure. That night, I sat in my living room with a photo album open on my lap. Thomas and I on our wedding day. Mark in his graduation gown. Sierra smiling next to me in a Christmas photo, wearing the red scarf I had knitted. I studied her eyes. Not the smile but the eyes. They were never looking at the camera, always slightly off to the side like her thoughts were elsewhere. I turned the page and my gaze landed on a picture from the summer 2 years ago. A barbecue in our backyard. Thomas was flipping burgers. Sierra was standing next to him, her hand on his arm mid-laugh. Mark was in the background looking at his phone. I had taken the photo myself. At the time I thought it was sweet. They were getting along. That was all I had wanted. But now the image made my stomach turn. I closed the album. Something in me hardened. I had spent decades forgiving things that were easier to ignore. I had excused selfishness, overlooked distance, made peace with the way time changes relationships. But this was not time. This was not miscommunication. This was calculated. I knew that now. The next day I went to the post office. I mailed a copy of the amended will to a safe deposit box under my name. I mailed another to Ruth, my sister in Vermont, with instructions to keep it sealed unless I told her otherwise. I was not being paranoid. I was being prepared. That afternoon I called Mark. I asked if he and Sierra could come for Sunday dinner. He seemed surprised. Is everything all right, Mom? I smiled through the phone. Of course. Just felt like having my family around the table. He agreed. I could hear Sierra in the background asking what time. 6 o'clock sharp, I said. I will make that lemon chicken you like. After we hung up, I sat back and folded my hands in my lap. I had no intention of confronting them at dinner. Not yet. But I wanted to see how Sierra acted now. I wanted to watch her move through my house, knowing what I knew, knowing what she thought she had hidden. And I needed to see Mark. Not to accuse him but to look into his eyes and search for something, anything that told me he was still the boy I raised. Sunday came quickly. I set the table with the same china from Thanksgiving, same candles, same linen napkins. I placed the serving dishes carefully, remembering every time I had done this in the past without questioning who would be sitting across from me. At 6 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. I opened it with a smile. Sierra looked radiant as always, coat draped over her shoulders, not a hair out of place. Mark leaned in for a hug. "Smells amazing in here, Mom," he said. I led them to the table. Dinner began the same way it always did: small talk, compliments about the food, updates about work. Sierra talked about redecorating the guest room. Mark mentioned a new client he had landed. I nodded, responded politely, but I was not really listening. I was watching, noticing. The way Sierra's hand brushed over her belly every few minutes. The way Mark barely glanced at her when she did it. The way her smile faltered, just slightly, whenever I caught her eye. She thought I would stay silent forever. That was her mistake. After dinner, while Mark was in the living room scrolling through a sports app, Sierra offered to help me with the dishes. I accepted with a nod. The kitchen was quiet except for the sound of running water and clinking plates. I handed her a towel and she dried each dish slowly, as if rehearsing control. I waited. I knew she would speak first. She always did when she thought silence gave me the upper hand. "That was lovely," she said, eyes fixed on a casserole dish. "You always make it feel so homey." Her voice had a sweetness to it, too polished to be sincere. I smiled. "I try." She glanced at me carefully. "You have been quiet lately." I rinsed a plate and placed it on the rack. "A lot on my mind. Anything I can help with?" The nerve of her. The casual audacity. I turned off the faucet and dried my hands. "Actually, I spoke with Martin this week." I saw the pause. Just half a second. Barely noticeable. But it was there. "Martin. Thomas's attorney," I said. "We reviewed some things together." Sierra set the dish down a little harder than necessary. "Oh," she asked, trying to sound neutral. I nodded. "Thomas made a few adjustments before he passed. Did he ever mention that to you?" She shook her head too quickly. "No. I mean, we did not talk about legal matters. That was between you two." I leaned against the counter, letting the silence linger just a breath longer than comfort allowed. "Of course." Her fingers twisted the towel. She was thinking, calculating. She did not ask what kind of adjustments. She did not have to. She already knew. Mark walked in just then, asking where the leftovers were. I pointed him to the fridge and watched Sierra exhale quietly, as if the interruption had saved her. But it had not. That night, after they left, I went upstairs to the room Thomas used as a study. Everything was just as he had left it. Meticulous, private, orderly. I opened the top drawer of his desk, the one he kept locked until the day he died. Inside was a small notebook. I had found it months ago but never had the heart to read it. Now I did. It was filled with short entries. Notes on house repairs. Grocery reminders. Then, further in, something different. July 14th, Sierra came by when Elaine was out. Said she needed to talk. She stayed too long. Something felt off. August 22nd, found her car parked 2 blocks away. Said she was visiting a friend. Same day, came to check on me. September 3rd, bank called. Large withdrawal under joint account. Asked Sierra. She said she was helping Elaine. Elaine knew nothing about it. I closed the book, my hands steady now. There it was. Not suspicion. Confirmation. She had been circling Thomas like a vulture long before he passed. And now she was circling me. I walked back downstairs and pulled the folder Martin had given me from the lockbox. I made copies, 3 sets. One for the attorney. One for Ruth. And one I placed in an envelope labeled with Sierra's name. I was not going to confront her with it. Not yet. But I wanted her to feel the shift. To wonder how much I knew. To lose sleep over what might happen next. I placed the envelope in the drawer of the foyer table, right where she would find it the next time she came early to help me set the table. Then I turned off the lights, sat on the edge of the couch, and watched the glow of the porch lamp stretch across the rug. Sierra thought she was playing chess. But she had forgotten something important. I had taught Mark how to play. The envelope disappeared the very next time Sierra visited. She arrived 20 minutes early, claiming traffic had been light, and offered to help set the table. I watched from the kitchen doorway as she opened the foyer drawer under the pretense of looking for coasters. Her hand hovered for a second longer than necessary. Then it was gone. She acted as if nothing had happened. Her smile was brighter than usual. Her compliments more excessive. The lasagna was the best I had ever made. The silver polish magazine worthy. And the flower arrangement professional level beautiful. Mark arrived just minutes later, apologizing for being late, even though he was on time. During dinner, Sierra touched her stomach more often than usual. Not protectively, performatively. Mark asked if she had scheduled her next checkup. And she answered quickly, perhaps too quickly. Yes, everything is fine. He did not ask anything else. I watched him carefully. He seemed tired, distracted. He barely touched his plate. When Sierra excused herself to take a phone call, I took the chance. Mark, I said gently. Is everything all right? He looked up surprised. Of course, why? You just seem distant. He hesitated, then shrugged. Work has been stressful. I let the silence sit for a beat. And at home. Another pause. A longer one. Sierra is complicated sometimes. I nodded, not pushing further. I could see he wanted to say more, but he was not ready. Not yet. Sierra returned, smile fixed, voice brighter. Sorry. Just the pediatrician confirming next month's schedule. She placed her hand on Mark's shoulder and gave it a squeeze. His body stiffened for a moment. Just slightly. But I saw it. After dinner, as they were putting on their coats, Sierra leaned in and kissed my cheek. Thank you, Elaine, she said sweetly. I really appreciate how welcoming you have been. Her voice was honey, but her eyes were knives. She knew I had put the envelope there. And now she was waiting for my next move. I closed the door behind them and turned the deadbolt slowly. The house fell into silence again. A quiet I had grown used to. I returned to the kitchen and poured myself a cup of tea. Chamomile. No sugar. I sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around the warm mug, thinking. If Sierra had opened the envelope, she had read the amended will. She now knew Thomas had left her nothing. She also knew that I knew far more than she had assumed. And still she smiled. That could only mean one thing. She had a plan of her own. The next morning Martin called. Elaine, he said. You may want to sit down. My fingers tightened around the receiver. Go ahead. A request has been submitted to contest Thomas's will. I closed my eyes. Filed by whom? Sierra Lawson Carter. Through a third-party attorney in New York. She is claiming emotional entitlement as a dependent. I almost laughed. Dependent. Yes. It is thin, but it is a strategy. Designed to create delay, confusion, perhaps force a settlement. How soon can we respond? I have already prepared the counterfiling. But there is something else. The fertility clinic came through. I held my breath. Elaine, there is no record of a current pregnancy linked to her name or alias. The only treatment she received 2 months before Thomas's passing was an embryo transfer. Unsuccessful. I felt my breath catch. So she is not pregnant. Not at this time. I thanked him and hung up the phone slowly. The room felt colder than before. Sierra had been bluffing. Using the idea of a child as leverage, as sympathy, as currency. And now she was trying to legally claw her way into a legacy that was never hers. But she had made a mistake. She underestimated a woman who had built this family from the ground up. A woman who had stayed silent not because she was weak, but because she was watching, calculating, waiting for the exact moment when truth would be louder than any lie. The following Thursday, I received a call from Ruth. She had just opened the package I sent weeks ago. Her voice was calm, but I could hear the tightness behind her words. Elaine, she said, are you sure you want to go through with this? I looked out the kitchen window, where the hydrangeas had started to fade, their blue petals curling at the edges. It is already in motion, I replied. I just wanted you to know in case things get louder. Ruth hesitated. Do you think Mark knows? I closed my eyes for a moment. No. And that is what breaks me the most. That afternoon, I went to the library and requested archived footage from the community center's fundraiser last fall. I remembered Sierra volunteering at the check-in desk while Thomas and I mingled. The footage was grainy, the angle not ideal, but it captured enough. At one point, Sierra stepped away from her post and followed Thomas down a hallway. She returned 12 minutes later, flustered, adjusting her blouse. I downloaded the footage onto a flash drive. It was not definitive. But paired with everything else, it painted a picture Sierra would not want others to see. That evening I sat down at my desk and wrote a letter. It was addressed to Mark. I did not accuse. I did not rage. I simply wrote facts. Dates. Records. Financial statements. Martin's findings. I attached a printed email from the clinic stating no current pregnancy existed. At the bottom I wrote, "Whatever you choose to believe after this, I will still love you. But I will no longer protect you from the truth." I sealed it and drove to Mark's office early the next morning. I handed it to the receptionist and asked her to place it on his desk personally. She agreed. I walked out into the morning sun with my spine straighter than it had been in weeks. 2 days passed without a word. Then late Saturday evening my doorbell rang. Mark stood there holding the envelope. His face was pale, eyes bloodshot. "Can I come in?" he asked. I nodded and stepped aside. He sat at the kitchen table, where so many quiet betrayals had been baked into meals and masked with pleasantries. "How long have you known?" he asked, voice hoarse. "Not everything," I said gently. "But enough." He ran a hand through his hair. "She told me I was being manipulated by you. That you were jealous. Controlling." I let the silence respond for me. Mark looked down at the envelope. "I thought I was protecting her. I did not see it. I did not want to." He placed a hand over his eyes. "She said she was pregnant with my father's child, Mom." His voice cracked. How do I even begin to process that? I moved slowly, placing a hand on his. "You begin by remembering who you are, not who she tried to make you." We sat like that for a long time. When he finally stood, he looked 10 years older. "I need time," he said. "You take all the time you need," I replied. "But do not let her twist one more thread of this family." He nodded, eyes brimming, then left without another word. I closed the door behind him and leaned against it, exhaling deeply. The truth was out. Not shouted, not exploded, but unwrapped piece by piece. And now the unraveling was hers to bear. By Monday morning I sensed the shift. The air felt lighter, not because anything had been resolved, but because the silence had finally been broken. I spent the day in the garden, pruning the rose bushes and pulling out the creeping ivy that had begun curling around the base of the porch. My hands moved with purpose, as if clearing the weeds from the soil mirrored the work I was doing in my life. Just before noon I received a call from Martin. "Elaine," he said, "I have an update. Sierra's attorney has quietly withdrawn the claim. No formal explanation, but I suspect pressure from her side." I closed my eyes and let the words sink in. "That means it is over?" "Legally, yes. But I imagine there is more to unfold personally." I thanked him and hung up. There was no joy in the win, only clarity. That afternoon I drove into town and stopped at the little cafe Thomas and I used to visit on Thursdays. I ordered an Earl Grey and sat by the window, watching couples pass by with dogs and strollers and the occasional tired glance that said more than words ever could. I was not thinking about Sierra. I was thinking about how quiet strength often goes unseen, how much of a woman's power is in what she endures, and what she finally refuses to accept. When I returned home, a car was parked outside. Not Mark's. Sierra's. She was standing at my front door, arms crossed, eyes hidden behind sunglasses. I walked up the path without speaking. "We need to talk," she said. I unlocked the door. "I do not think there is anything left to say." "You told him," she hissed. "You left me no choice." She stepped inside uninvited, but I did not stop her. I closed the door and faced her. She removed her sunglasses and for the first time the polish was gone. Her expression was tight, tired. "You think you won," she said. "You think this makes you the hero." "I do not care about being the hero, Sierra. I care about truth." "Truth?" she snapped. "You think you know everything? You do not. You never saw what was really happening." I studied her. "Then help me understand. Why lie? Why say you were pregnant? Why try to take something that was never yours?" Her eyes flickered. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. For a moment I thought she might actually tell the truth. But instead she straightened her shoulders. "I had nothing," she said coldly. "No family. No stability. Marrying Mark was my way out. But it was never enough. Your husband saw me. Really saw me. He listened. And you thought that entitled you to everything he built with me? Her silence was answer enough. I stepped aside. I think you should leave. She did not move. He will come back to me, she said. You think you have won him over, but you will see. I looked at her, my voice low. What you do not understand is that this was never a competition. This was about love, not leverage. She stood there for another beat, then turned and left. I watched her drive away, her taillights vanishing down the hill. That night, I lit a fire in the hearth and sat in Thomas's chair. I ran my fingers along the worn armrest, thinking of the man who had complicated everything and yet, in the end, had tried to make it right. I did not know what Mark would do next. I only knew that I had done what I needed to. The truth had been spoken. The mask had slipped. And whatever came next, I would face it standing tall. It was nearly 2 weeks before I heard from Mark again. The silence in between was not heavy. It was necessary. I spent the days tending to the small things I had once overlooked. I rearranged the books in Thomas's study, dusted the top shelf in the hallway, and even repotted the ficus that had long outgrown its ceramic home. There was peace in the routine, in reclaiming the rhythm of a house that had known too many secrets. Then one crisp Sunday morning there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Mark standing there, holding a brown paper bag and a look I had not seen in years. He was not angry. He was not lost. He was humbled. I brought apple fritters, he said. From Betty's. Thought we could talk. I stepped aside and let him in. We sat at the kitchen table, the same spot where so much had fractured and quietly started to heal. He pulled the pastries from the bag and set them on a plate. We ate in silence for a few minutes before he finally spoke. I moved out, he said. 3 days ago. I looked at him, not surprised. And where are you staying? With a coworker for now. Until I figure out what is next. He tore off a piece of the fritter and stared at it. She lied about more than the pregnancy. About debts. About letters. She even told people you refused to help us financially. Made you sound cruel. I stayed quiet. He needed space to unload it all, not be interrupted. I feel like I failed twice, he said. Once for not seeing it. And once for letting her turn me against you. You did not fail, I said gently. You trusted someone. That is not a weakness. It just was not returned in kind. He looked up at me. His eyes clear but tired. I do not know how to rebuild what she broke. With you. With myself. I reached across the table and touched his hand. You just did. You showed up. That is how it starts. We finished the pastries and moved to the living room. He walked over to the mantel and picked up a photo of him as a boy, grinning with 2 missing teeth and an arm around Thomas. Do you think he knew? He asked. He knew something was wrong, I replied. But I think he believed you would find your way back. Mark nodded slowly. I think I would like to take a break from everything for a while. Just breathe. Think. Maybe travel. Somewhere quiet. That sounds like a good idea, I said. You are always welcome here. No questions. No judgment. He smiled. It was not the smile of a man who had figured everything out, but it was honest. And that was more than enough. Before he left, he stood at the doorway, hesitating. Thank you, Mom, for not giving up on me. I never did, I said. And I never will. After he drove off, I stood at the window watching the wind stir the last of the autumn leaves across the yard. The house was quiet again, but this time it did not feel empty. It felt open, like something new was finally allowed to begin. Not in place of what had been lost, but in honor of what had endured.